XC40, and what we're really talking about today actually is the fact that Volvo will bring Google Maps, Google Assistant, and the Google Play Store to future cars. So having the Play Store in here is exciting for developers because it's a way to get applications into the car without having to go and talk to every single car company on the planet in order to do it, which is kind of nice. It's also nice for drivers because you can just get what you want. But before we go there, this is Android. So you see the sort of like an app picker. You can see a way to work with users. There's some car-specific information here, rear view camera. There's also a way to work with the hardware in the car, like the fan and so forth. So if I do this in a car, you just tap, 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 it just works. But what's happening is that it's using a new set of vehicle-specific APIs in Android that are standardized so that this app talks to a very predictable API and does what you would expect. Now, because it's a standard API talking to the hardware, it means it'll work across any car that's running Android. And that means that apps can use an API and do something predictable. Set passenger temperature to 25 degrees.
Okay, setting the passenger temperature to 25
So the assistant is using the standard API to make something happen in the car, which is kind of cool.
Who's defining that standard API?
So Google, the Android automotive team, worked with a lot of OEMs to come up with what that should look like.
Okay.
And sort of help come up with something reasonably standardized so that there's HVAC, there's working with the vehicle network, working with the screens in the car, working with the different sensors in the car. So kind of the equivalent of what we did over the years with phones, you know, cameras and gyroscopes and all that good stuff. So yeah, so we came up with that with a lot of input from our partners.
And is this, so you say it's standard, but is it on, have all the major manufacturers signed up, or most of them, or kind of what does that look like?
Can't really talk about, I mean, Volvo's announced they're going to do something in production. I think we'll have to wait for our other partners to say what they want to do. But yeah, but I guess the fact is that it's part of Android open source.
Okay,
so if anyone wants to use it.
So when they say they're supported, and when they're in Android
if it says it's Android,
yeah,
it'll support that. Yeah.
Cool.
That's a good question. So if I then go here and say, look at one of the apps, which is Maps, we've worked with this to make sure it works in car hardware. So screens in cars, for example, can vary a lot in size. They're not really standardized in any way. So we've spent time doing this. The other thing that's new in Android is an API to work with the vehicle cluster. So if you look over here, this content right here is actually being generated by the Google Map app at the same time. So it's driving two screens basically. And if I go away from this, and if you're the DJ and you start working with the media and doing other stuff, this stays in front of the driver.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. When I turn off the active navigation, it goes to more of just an overview map as well, with some 3D buildings and so forth. It's really nice to have in front of the driver's view here. As you can see, I just tapped on the media. This is actually Volvo's Census UI, they call it, which is their approach to how the car should look. So I can switch between apps, media apps. I could go choose something from my library. Now this media player is defined by Volvo because they want it to feel like a Volvo and work consistently, regardless of the app. But at the same time, they want to make sure that application developers can just drop an app in here and have it work. So if I go and switch to, let's see here, I don't know, Pocket Cast, start playing a podcast, it's got different actions in here, it's got different album art, and in fact it's got a different structure for their information over here. So this is driven by an API called Media Browse. This one's driven by one called Media Session. And so any app that implements those two APIs will show up in the new Google Play Store for automotive. Now this is a work in progress, we haven't shipped it yet, we're working with Volvo on this. But you can see how there's a heavy emphasis right now on media apps and messaging apps. So really, if I go look at the total number, I mean, there are lots and lots of apps. Last year when we were talking about this, there were like around 400 apps. Now there are thousands of apps. So you don't have to wait for Volvo to decide to make a relationship with Deezer, for example. You can just go to the Play Store and install Deezer if that's what you want to do. Excuse me. And it'll start installing. It's a standard Google app. Android app. No surprises here. Bit about the publisher. I'm just going to cancel that. But then it'll just show up here. So this is really amazing flexibility for drivers or users. The other part too is for car companies. They then don't have to try and keep up with all the apps.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. It's the final thing I wanted to show you here is that cars are inherently multi-user. Multiple people drive them. Lots of car sharing ideas are making that even more common. So we need a way to easily switch between Android users, which is less common on a phone, right? You don't typically do that. But if I tap here, you'll see that this adjusts hardware in the car over those same APIs, but it also, the user, as you know from an Android phone, the user can also have multiple kinds of accounts. They may have a Google account, maybe for their calendar or for their map. They may have a Spotify account, and it automatically loads settings. It can connect with a different device as well. So yeah, I think the thing, like ideally when you come into a car and you've got your phone or your key fob or neither of those, but you can draw a pattern on the screen, is your stuff should come with you. And it should stay here while you're in the car, and when you leave the car, it should leave with you. That's what we want to enable here. So I think with the sort of Android in the car with the Play Store, we feel like this is a really pretty compelling story, not just for the car companies, but actually for people who drive cars. So,
is there a concept of multi-user at any point in time? Because driver and passenger. So it seems like you have a predominant user, but if like I'm the navigator and I want I have my music playlist that I'm familiar with on how to find and what to do.
So we cover a lot of those use cases that we hear about. We don't have any of them in this setup here. We're definitely aware of them. We're definitely thinking through them. Right now we want to get the core use cases really good. But yeah, typically, I mean, for example, you can have multiple phones paired, right? Bluetooth, and one person can just say, hey, let's play music from that phone, for example. And that's an existing use case. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, we're definitely aware of those. Or you found the location on your map on your phone and you want to send it to the car and have that be the one. Yeah, totally. The APIs are all there to do that. It's a case of how you build that experience in a way that any developer could use. Right? So yeah.